Hello. In this video, I'd like to introduce two new features of the K2 ERP Report Designer, PivotGrid and Table Reports. These features significantly expand your reporting capabilities without requiring any interface programming. Now, all you need is an SQL query and the report structure is generated automatically. You can quickly build both traditional table reports and powerful pivot tables for advanced data analysis. Table reports. For this demonstration, I've already created a test report group. Inside it, there's a simple SQL query. This is just a sample table containing several fields. There's no special logic here. We're simply selecting a few columns from the database. Now let's open the table report. Notice that a new settings column has appeared. This is important. The settings column is available only for two report types, PivotGrid and Table Report. For example, if we open a dashboard, this column isn't displayed. In other words, these settings are available only where they are actually needed. Let's return to our table report. Here we can see all the fields returned by the SQL query. Each field has both its system name and the display name shown to users. By default, the display name is empty, so the system uses the original field name. However, we can easily change it. For example, let's rename the group field to multiple groups. Save the changes. Now, let's open the report preview. As you can see, the column is displayed with its new name. You can rename any column in exactly the same way, regardless of its original database field name. This is especially useful when technical field names need to be replaced with user-friendly labels. You can also rearrange the columns. The user determines the display order and the report is rebuilt automatically. This means you can quickly adapt the report layout for a specific task without modifying the SQL query. PivotGrid. Now let's move on to the new report type, PivotGrid. Open it. Here you'll also find the settings column. However, the concept is completely different. All available fields are generated dynamically based on the SQL query. That's why you don't need to define the report structure manually. Everything is created automatically. Let me show you how it works. For example, let's use year as the pivot column and amount as the value. For better readability, let's rename amount to total. Save the changes. Now open the preview. We get a classic pivot table. Groups are displayed on the left, years across the top, and totals inside the table. This is exactly how reports for sales, expenses, profits, and many other financial indicators are typically presented. Quick configuration. Another very convenient feature is quick configuration directly inside the report. The PivotGrid includes its own configuration panel. Every change made here corresponds directly to the report designer settings. This allows users to rebuild reports on the fly while working. For example, let's configure the report so that we have a list of groups and separate years. Now we'll simply swap the fields. Of course, this isn't the ideal layout for this particular example. However, it clearly demonstrates how flexible the PivotGrid is. Now we can see the list of groups with values displayed for each year. In just a few clicks, we've completely changed the way the data is presented. And all of this happens without writing a single line of code. Hierarchical tables. Now I'd like to show you another useful feature. PivotGrid supports hierarchical row groups. To use them, simply add multiple fields to the rows section. For example, let's keep counterpart name and year. Open the preview. Now each row can be expanded. Imagine this is a list of employees. The top level could display the employee's name, while the expanded row could show the login, department, position, or any other related information. Our example uses test data. However, the same principle works for any dataset. This allows you to build sophisticated multi-level reports without creating a custom interface. Using SQL aliases. Now let's look at another useful capability. In SQL, we can use aliases. For example, we'll rename counterpart name to counteragent. We'll leave year unchanged. And we'll rename amount to summa. Save the query. Now let's open the PivotGrid settings again. As you can see, all the new names have already been updated automatically. The system simply uses the field names returned by the SQL query. This means you can define user-friendly names directly in SQL without performing any additional configuration. Everything updates automatically. There's no need to edit YAML files or any other configuration files manually. Automatic detection of new fields. Finally, I'd like to demonstrate one of the most powerful features. Let's modify the SQL query and add a new field. For example, record count. Save the query. Now reopen the PivotGrid settings. You'll immediately see the new field appear in the available columns, and it's ready to use in your report. The system automatically analyzes the SQL query result and detects all newly added fields. That's why there's no longer any need to edit YAML files or manually update configuration files. Any changes made to your SQL query instantly become available inside the report designer. This significantly speeds up report development and makes long-term maintenance much easier. Conclusion. Today, we've explored two powerful new features of the K2 ERP Report Designer. The first is table reports, which make it easy to build traditional reports with flexible column names and customizable layouts. The second is PivotGrid, which enables you to create powerful pivot tables, analyze data, build hierarchical reports, quickly reorganize report structures, and automatically detect new SQL fields. As a result, even complex analytical reports can now be created much faster, while ongoing maintenance becomes significantly simpler. Thank you for watching. Try the new features of the K2 ERP Report Designer, experiment with your own SQL queries, and build exactly the reports your business needs.